Chapter 18, Love's Enchanted Garden. The enchanted garden of Stardust was silent in the fading light of dusk, its magical flowers closing their petals for the night. Paige walked along the familiar path, her heart pounding with each step. She hadn't planned to come here, her feet had simply led her to this place of memories and magic. As she rounded a bend, she stopped short. There, standing by the fountain where they had shared their first kiss, was Elliot. He seemed lost in thought, absently running his hand through the water, causing it to shimmer with faint, magical lights. For a moment, Paige considered turning back. They had agreed to meet at the park, not here. But before she could retreat, Elliot looked up and their eyes met. "Paige," he said softly, a mixture of surprise and hope in his voice. "Elliot," she replied, her own voice barely above a whisper. I didn't expect to see you here." He gave a small, rueful smile. "Neither did I. I was just walking, and somehow ended up here. Funny how that happens, isn't it?" Paige nodded, taking a few hesitant steps closer. "It's like the garden wanted us to meet here." As she approached, a nearby rosebush suddenly burst into bloom, its flowers opening in a cascade of color and fragrance. Both Paige and Elliot jumped, startled by the sudden display, then looked at each other and burst into laughter. "Well," Elliot chuckled, "I guess some things never change. Magic still has a mind of its own around us." Paige's laughter softened into a warm smile. "Do you remember the first time we came here? When you tried to make the flowers dance for me?" Elliot groaned good-naturedly. "How could I forget? We ended up chasing that runaway bouquet all over the garden. I've never seen flowers move so fast." As they reminisced, the tension between them began to ease. They found themselves walking side by side along the garden paths, sharing memories of their magical misadventures. "Oh, and what about the time with the enchanted cookbook?" Paige giggled. "I've never seen spaghetti so determined to escape a pot." Elliot grinned, his eyes twinkling with mirth. "Or the great library reshelving disaster? I still can't believe we managed to convince your boss that a sudden gust of wind rearranged every book by color instead of the Dewey Decimal System." Their laughter echoed through the garden, seeming to bring it to life around them. Flowers turned to follow their progress, fairy lights twinkled in the trees, and the very air seemed to hum with magic and possibility. As they walked, Paige found herself noticing things she had overlooked before. The way the moonlight cast intricate shadows on the path, creating patterns that seemed to move and dance. The soft whisper of the wind through the leaves, carrying with it the faint scent of magic and possibility. Even the earth beneath their feet seemed to pulse with a gentle, magical energy. Elliot, too, was seeing the garden with new eyes. He marveled at the subtle magic in the mundane, the perfect symmetry of a spider's web glistening with dew, the graceful arc of a fern unfurling its fronds, the synchronized blinking of fireflies in the deepening twilight. These were magics he had always taken for granted, too focused on grand gestures and spectacular spells to appreciate the everyday wonders around him. As they meandered through the garden, their conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and shared glances. They spoke of the time apart, of the lessons learned and the growth experienced. Paige told Elliot about her attempts at small magics in the library, of the joy she found in bringing stories to life for the children during story time. "I finally understood what you meant about the wonder of magic," she admitted. Seeing their faces light up, it was like I was experiencing it all for the first time too. Elliot shared his experiences with non-magical painting, the frustration and ultimate satisfaction of creating something beautiful through sheer effort and persistence. "I realized that magic isn't just about spells and enchantments," he said. "It's about creation, about bringing something new into the world, whether that's through a wand or a paintbrush." As they talked, the garden seemed to respond to their emotions. When Paige spoke of her fears and doubts, the path darkened, shadows lengthening around them. But as she described her growing acceptance of magic in her life, flowers bloomed in her footsteps, their petals glowing softly in the dim light. When Elliot recounted his struggles with feeling inadequate without his magic, a cool mist settled around them, mirroring his melancholy. But as he spoke of his newfound appreciation for the magic of everyday life, the mist lifted, replaced by a warm, gentle breeze that carried the scent of sun-warmed earth and blooming flowers. As their mirth subsided, they found themselves back at the fountain. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, the only sound the gentle splashing of water. Paige, Elliot finally said, his voice soft but earnest. I owe you an apology. I've been so caught up in trying to impress you with grand magical gestures that I lost sight of what really matters. Magic isn't about big displays or solving every problem with a wave of a wand. It's about finding wonder in the everyday, about creating joy and beauty in small moments. You tried to show me that all along, and I was too blind to see it. Paige felt tears welling in her eyes. Oh, Elliot. I owe you an apology too. I was so afraid of chaos, of losing control, that I almost lost the best thing that ever happened to me. These past weeks have shown me that a little unpredictability, a little magic, can make life so much richer and more beautiful. I was so busy trying to maintain order that I almost missed out on the most wonderful adventure of all, loving you. Elliot reached out, gently taking her hands in his. So where do we go from here? He asked, hope and uncertainty mingling in his eyes. Paige squeezed his hands, a determined smile spreading across her face. Forward, together. If you're willing to give us another chance, I'd like to try again. Not as a librarian and a wizard, but as Paige and Elliot, two people who love each other and are ready to embrace all the magic life has to offer, big and small. Elliot's face lit up with joy. Nothing would make me happier, he said, pulling her close. As their lips met in a kiss, the garden around them erupted in magical celebration. Flowers bloomed in heart shapes, fairy lights danced in the air, and a gentle rain of glittering stardust fell around them. When they parted, both laughing in delight at the garden's enthusiastic response, Elliot raised an eyebrow. I swear that wasn't me this time, he said with a grin. Paige giggled, brushing some magical stardust from his hair. I believe you. I think the garden's just happy we figured things out. They sat on the edge of the fountain, hands intertwined, watching as the garden continued its joyful display. Paige leaned her head on Elliot's shoulder, feeling a sense of peace and rightness that she hadn't experienced in weeks. You know, she said softly, I think I finally understand what you've been trying to show me all along. Magic isn't just about spells and enchantments. It's about seeing the world with wonder, about finding joy in unexpected places. It's about love. Elliot nodded, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. And I've learned that the most powerful magic of all is the kind that brings people together, that creates connections and moments of beauty. You taught me that, Paige. Your love for books, for stories, for the little moments of everyday life, that's a kind of magic I never fully appreciated before. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as fireflies began to emerge, their soft light mingling with the fairy lights in the trees. The night was warm, filled with the sweet scent of night-blooming flowers and the gentle music of a nearby stream. So, Elliot said eventually, a hint of his old mischievous grin playing on his lips, what's our next adventure? Should we try to organize the most magical library fundraiser Stardust has ever seen? Paige laughed, the sound clear and joyful in the quiet garden. Maybe we should start with something a little smaller. How about a magical movie night at my place? We could enchant the popcorn to change flavors with each handful, or make the characters step out of the screen during particularly exciting scenes. Elliot's eyes lit up with excitement. That sounds perfect. And maybe we could invite Maggie and Jasper too? Make it a proper double date? Paige nodded enthusiastically. Yes. Oh, and we should stop by Beanstalk Bistro on the way. I've been practicing a little spell to make the cupcakes sing, and I've been dying to try it out. As they continued to plan, their excitement growing with each new idea, the garden around them seemed to hum with approval. Flowers swayed in a non-existent breeze, and the water in the fountain leapt higher. Together, they created magical floating lights that danced around the bistro, casting warm, ever-changing colors on the walls. Even Abigail got in on the fun, revealing a touch of magic of her own as she made the potted plants on the windowsill grow and shrink in time with the music playing softly in the background. As the night wore on, Paige and Elliot found themselves curled up in a cozy booth, surrounded by the gentle aftermath of their magical play. Abigail had bid them good night, telling them to lock up when they left and giving them one last knowing wink. "You know," Paige said, her voice soft with contentment, "I think this is what I missed most. Not the big spells or the grand gestures, but this. Just being together, creating little moments of magic and joy." Elliot nodded, pulling her closer. "I know what you mean. It's like we create our own kind of magic when we're together. Something that's more than just spells and potions." Paige smiled, leaning up to press a soft kiss to his cheek. "Exactly. It's a magic all our own, and I never want to lose it again." As they finally left the bistro, locking the door behind them with a promise to return soon, they stepped out into a world that seemed full of new possibilities. The stars twinkled brightly overhead, and a warm breeze carried the scent of night-blooming flowers. Paige and Elliot's journey was far from over.